Make rocket ship go now. Hi everybody, it's Robert Ogilvy, executive strategist and EQ coach. Glad you guys could join me today. Um, so today, what are we talking about? Why is it important to focus on the team over the individual? Some people get this. I think a lot of us have some vague notion of it, but I think it's easy to think of it as it's just a kind of flavor. What do you like to focus on? What do I like to focus on? And I just want to underscore there are damn good reasons why you want to be focusing on the team, particularly if you're looking for long-term success. It's really useful long-term or short-term, but it becomes particularly useful when you start thinking about the long-term things that you want. And again, in this context, I could be talking about business industry in terms of you want learning and performance and productivity, but really this fits in any context, right? So this isn't just true for industry. This is true for literally any org. It could be a nonprofit, it could be public sector. This is the nature of how this stuff comes together. Okay. I'll just tell you high level what the things are. I'm going to explain 60-30-10 rule. I'm going to talk about the role of team dynamics. I'm going to talk about system needs versus kind of incremental choices. The role of the manager, and then ultimately org change. Oh, and I'm going to try to do that in 9 minutes. No problem, right? Okay. First thing, it's going to frame up the kind of impact size of this. And this comes out of Ruth Wagerman and Richard Hackman's work around teams, team dynamics, and team diagnostic survey and things, right? But there is a 60-30-10 rule. And what that says is that roughly when you're dealing with what's impacting performance, 60% of that is an org, a strategic level, structural level, business premise issue, right? This is high level stuff that's affecting everyone, and it might be nebulous in that it's certainly not one person, but it is the corpus of all the reasons that you're there and all the directions you're headed in and all these assumptions which are directing the nature of why you're even there, why you're even working, or what missions you're taking on, right? 60% is that. 30% is the team level, the group level. And you could think of that in terms of the team around me. You could think of that in terms of group processes. You could think of that in terms of like daily workflow. But that's what the 30% is. And then the 10% is the individual, right? So from that, it's pretty easy to remind us that if you're blind to these top two and you think you can just target an individual for training or some remedial coaching or something like that, and you're not getting the results you want, well, of course, because the rest of it is not transforming, right? So even if this person went to horrible to a star performer, it's just a 1/10th drop in the bucket compared to working on the team and working on the org. Okay. So that just kind of frames up the impact size of it. Work on something that's impactful, which means team, and then ultimately once you get that right, you can work on the org level stuff. Don't just think that and I would say overemphasis on the individual is what also leads us to this kind of heroic great man leadership thinking where we have these deluded notions that some magic person is going to save us, or I think on a more day-to-day level that there could be some magic person with all the right skill sets and all the right balance of personality traits that could do everything, and like that's crazy. Like it's just crazy and unsustainable, right? And that's what leads to our kind of rock star unicorn seeking, right? It's nutty. Okay. So first of all, why focus on the team? Um, Part of it is realizing that in that team level focus, there's team dynamics going on, right? And there's a healthy way to get those team dynamics going. One of the six team conditions, one of the three essential team conditions is real team, and that's essentially dealing with does the team feel kind of normal and stable, and is there a cooperative reason that they need to deal with each other, interoperate with each other, cooperate with each other to add value, right? If you could just easily split everyone up and have them individually doing their thing and they never have to communicate, newsflash, that's not a team. That's just a group, even a group that might be coexisting, right? Best use case of that, if you ever worked at a call center, you could be surrounded by 2 dozen other people. Even people that you, on some level, know very well. If you don't have to interact to do your mission, like newsflash, you ain't a team, right? Um, Looking at things at that level becomes really useful to see on a day-to-day level how you're operating, how decisions gets made, but also kind of this pull of kind of approach and avoidance behaviors, who's initiating, who's following through on things, and what people's appetite is, right? This is the part of the team where we're trying to make sure that they have enough skills. We'll get into this in a second, and enough values represented. And so what that ends up meaning is that the more robustness of values, that means that they can think of it as a kind of error checking. This technically gets into an area called distributed cognition or embodied cognition, but it's like the team decision making is higher and better. I've mentioned that in some of the other videos, right? So that's what diversity of values is actually protection against. It's like bad sloppy thinking and groupthink because it has this like robustness of perspective taking and values that can be woven into it, right? That comes out in the team dynamics. Um, Next point, third point. Ultimately, when we're looking at something long term, it's better to look at the systems level needs, a bunch of needs at once, and then long term where those are going and try to solve for that problem, as opposed to what can feel like an individual incremental need. So if you think of this as a kind of like hiring problem, right? You're trying to solve not just for the moment, but for the future skill sets that are needed, which starts to get into like developability and things like that, right? And that is a more nuanced, subtle problem, but it's ultimately one that if you can get it right is much better. And you also like, if you had lower turnover and you have people that can transform and do more roles over time, it's a lot better for your organization than having the annual, like, I don't know, a 12-month turnover, a 24-month turnover of people, right? Then you never develop good managers and leaders. But I guess part of that is also then to say that the more you can clarify future what future skills and capacities you're going to need, the more that you can solve for both the team performance in the moment and the leadership development, or even just to kind of soften it, the talent development of the future, right? There's a way to do that. And looking at the team as a system is a better way to approach that. Um, Next, fourth point. Managers Management is fundamentally different in terms of how it adds value than the individual star performance. A lot of times our job descriptions do a pathetic job of underscoring that, right? There is this kind of myth of you're the best salesman, you're the best engineer, you're the best customer service person, you're the best whatever. Oh, that means you're going to be a good manager, right? Fundamentally different viewpoint. You might be, you might be able to transition to that. But the manager is fundamentally an enabler, right? An enabler of others, an enabler of the team, right? And so, if you're used to looking at individual like quotas and things, that mindset is incredibly counterproductive when your role is now to enable a bunch of people, 6, 8 people around you or some amount of people around you, right? It's fundamentally not the same. And if you're too much coming from that competitive individual quota mindset, straight up, you're going to be a bad manager. We know that 2/3 of people quit because of bad bosses. There's also evidence which shows which our early boss experiences, think like first 5 years, are very important in calcifying um, not just what we think of managers, but basically kind of incepting, oh, this is how I must lead. This is how I must be a manager, right? And so if 2/3 of the time that's a bad role model, you're implicitly getting trained to be an arsehole too, right? And we don't want that. The role of management is fundamentally different at an enabling level. And then you can imagine too, it's not crazy to think that an executive leader who needs to deal with multiple teams and multiple people in longer spans of time, again, it's a leap again, right? So it takes a different skill set to do that. I guess just underscoring that having great teams means great managers and great executive leaders, right? Which brings me to the last point, org change. Okay, so we talked about 60-30-10 rule. All right, so if we're focusing on teams, we can get the 10 and the 30. How do we get to that 60? This is stuff where ultimately we need to be questioning the high level strategy, the business premise or mission of why we're doing what we're doing, and then getting into the right org change efforts to accomplish that, right? And yeah, that does become really demanding, but that still means the fundamental unit we're working with, we can deal with wide level organizational stuff, but that's almost like mass marketing to individuals. It ends up being better if we're talking about transforming workflow and the kind of the operational cues, which are kind of locking someone into a day-to-day way of working. If we're working with teams, now it could be in multiple teams, and really when you think about what that is, at the higher levels of not just self-management but of self-governance, self-management is kind of like, can I operate well on our own, right? Self-governance is like, wait a minute, do am I more aware of how we as a team add value than some other person? So is it actually better for us to be kind of deciding the strat of what we're doing and how we're add value than someone else? And yeah, if you can rise to that level, that's fantastic, right? And so imagine you have a bunch of teams in your org questioning the business value, questioning the fundamental purpose and mission of how they add value to others. Yeah, that's what an org change effort is, right? And the alignment thing is that we want enough of those basically going in the right direction. Yeah, that we can renew, that we can do something different, that we can, part of it's an engagement effort. All of this starts actually with trust and engagement to be able to do any org change effort. But that's ultimately what it is. If you're kind of questioning and redoing your strategy. It's like, let's get multiple teams in the organization to rethink how we add value, right? Again, team level activity. Um, Obviously, there's lots more I could riff on, but that's enough for today. That's enough for now. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.